President Xi met with Joe Biden. Let's get some analysis now on those talks. Richard McGregor joins me. He's a senior fellow for East Asia at the Lowy Institute. Richard, the fact that that meeting went for 3 hours and the fact that it's the first time since Biden has met Xi as president, how significant are those talks?
Well, it's significant. I don't think it's yet transformational. Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, put it quite well on the plane on the way over, where he said the US and China are attempting to rebuild the floor in their relationship. In other words, to stop it spiralling down. When they're finished, they might have built, a bungalow rather than a mansion, if you like. So there are positives out of this. They're going to reopen talks on some issues that the Chinese stopped after Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan. Climate change, for example. Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, is due to travel to China to try and flesh out the leaders' talks, put some more flesh on the bones. But nobody should think, though, that the deep structural divisions between these two countries have been solved. That's going to take a lot more work.
Joe Biden said afterwards, speaking to reporters, he said, "I'm not suggesting this is kumbaya, but I do not believe there's a need for concern of a new Cold War." Is he overstating things?
Well, there was a Cold War-ish element to the meeting in a way, if you like. You might, in parts of the Cold War, the leaders of the Soviet Union and the United States could never actually meet in Washington or Moscow because there simply wasn't the political capital to allow each other to invite their leaders to those places. So for the moment, I think it seems like the US and China are also going to meet in third countries, in this case, in Bali on the sidelines of the G20 meeting. So, the Cold War, you can argue, is there a new Cold War or not? You can argue it both ways. But the fundamental, paths that these, rivalry between these two countries is still there, even after, a pretty solid 3-hour meeting.
The White House, in its briefing, said that the two leaders had agreed to empower key senior officials to maintain communication and deepen constructive efforts. Are you encouraged by that?
Yes, you'd have to be encouraged by that given the situation. But just remember a few caveats. It's only a month ago that the US applied the most stringent sort of technology controls they've put on exports of any kind of US technology, particularly semiconductors, to China. Somebody described that to me today as kind of a meat cleaver, and that's going to get a lot of other countries caught up in its web as well. The Taiwan issue still sits out there. Problems in the South China Sea, that still sits out there. The clash of systems, political systems, sits out there. But what is good, I think, is that both sides have acknowledged their deep differences and they're going to try and construct a way to manage them. So that's the best message out of today's meeting.
The other issue, the big one off the back of the Pelosi visit and ongoing, is the Taiwan situation. President Biden said he doesn't believe there's an imminent threat of China invading Taiwan. So he's clearly trying to reassure people about where things are at there.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really thought in the Pentagon and the like there's an imminent threat of an invasion. There's a lot more water under the bridge before we get to that position. But as to the issue sort of being sort of put on the back burner, just think about this. Well, I presume the Republicans will take the House of Representatives in the midterm elections. Kevin McCarthy, the new Speaker, if he is the new Speaker, he will want to go to Taiwan as well. How does China react to that? After Nancy Pelosi's visit, they had a kind of 4-week sort of mock blockade of the island. So, there's a lot of other players in US politics besides Mr. Biden. There's the Congress, and then, of course, we have positioning before the presidential election.
Yeah, indeed. So we shouldn't, as you said at the very outset, get too far ahead of ourselves on how important that meeting was. But when you look at what we've seen the last few weeks, we had the midterms in the United States. Biden was clearly had a spring in his step on that front. but then also in Beijing, very importantly, Xi Jinping's leadership reaffirmed for another term. So what was the significance of that as the backdrop, do you believe, for these talks?
Yes, Kieran, I'm sorry I'm sounding like a bit of a cold shower, maybe a lukewarm shower on optimism after this meeting. But I think you're right to point to the domestic situations of both leaders. Xi Jinping had to get through the party congress and get a third term. He's done that. His position is very strong. Joe Biden, I think, is stronger after the midterm elections as well. There was a chance he'd be a complete lame duck president. That's not the case. So I think that allows both men to receive each other with more confidence and maybe have more respect for each other's positions, because in the short term, neither is going anywhere and both have, reasonable authority to act. On
just finally, that reaffirming of Xi's leadership, and I haven't spoken to you since that, so I'd love to get your thoughts on it. The Standing Committee of the Politburo, it's 7 men. In fact, the whole Politburo is men. The one female has retired, so all men. The 7 Standing Committee, all Xi Jinping loyalists. So that really puts to the end to any doubt as to his complete authority. But I guess with that comes complete ownership if there's any major flaw or stuff up in the system.
Well, that's right. And so where does the accountability stop, and does it stop with Xi? One thing I'd say about the 7 people of the inner circle of the Politburo, they are loyalists, but they're not cronies, right? They're all competent uber technocrats. That's the first thing. And on accountability, I think we see the COVID zero policy really cracking under pressure in China these days. Nobody really blames or seems to blame Xi for those problems, though it's certainly his policy. And so, the economy's slowing, things are getting tough in China. When does that allow Xi's many critics to come to the surface and get some contestability back into the system? That's certainly what I'm looking out for.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride on that front as well, to keep an eye on all of that. Richard McGregor, a senior fellow for East Asia at the Lowy Institute. Great to get your insights, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.